The Hypnobirthing Toolkit is a complete hypnobirthing and birth preparation course helping you to go into the birth of your baby with confidence and positivity. It's completely self-paced with pre-recorded videos, presentations, audios, PDFs, plus monthly live classes. It's a more affordable and flexible way to learn hypnobirthing and help you have the positive birth experience you deserve. Follow the link in the description below to begin your positive birth journey today. Hello and welcome to the Bell Mama Hypnobirthing and Positive Birth podcast. My name is Ellie Waddington. I'm a hypnobirthing teacher, antenatal instructor and positive birth coach, and I'm here to help you go into the birth of your baby with a positive mindset. Every week I share my top tips, advice and amazing birth stories to help you go from fearful and anxious about your birth to positive and confident. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and let's get into this episode. Hey gorgeous mama, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. If you are new here, welcome. We have a lot of fun here, you're going to love it. I am so proud of you for taking this first step on your positive birth journey, and you should be very, very proud of yourself. So hang around, you're going to love it. And if you are not new here, welcome back. How have you been? Now, in today's episode, we are going to get stuck right in to the topic of why hypnobirthing is for all births. I'm joined by the amazing Abby Watson from Love Your Birth Training. She is absolutely amazing. You need to go over and follow her on Instagram. She is such a cool person to talk to. And we're going to be busting some myths. We're going to be smashing some stereotypes and getting into how hypnobirthing can not only help you in every single birth scenario, but oh my goodness, all these different life scenarios as well. So if you are ready to have your mind blown, carry on listening. Hi Abby, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me on. I'm so excited to be here and to be talking about this topic that I care so much about.
Yeah, and you know, when I thought of this topic, I was like, I know exactly who I want to talk about this because you are incredibly passionate about this. But before we introduce what the topic is, would you please just tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you are, and what you do?
Absolutely. So I'm Abby Watson. I teach hypnobirthing. However, these days I spend my time training other passionate women to become hypnobirthing teachers themselves. So I run a business called Love Your Birth Training. It's a global business, so we have hypnobirthing teachers here in the UK, but also further afield. And my speciality is training people to become really engaging and effective hypnobirthing teachers. And I would like to think they become hypnobirthing teachers with this understanding that hypnobirthing absolutely can be for all births. So yeah, that's me. I'm in West Yorkshire, where I live with my husband and my 4 children. It was through my own experiences of using hypnobirthing in my pregnancies and births that made me so passionate about this incredibly simple but amazingly powerful set of tools. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah, thank you so much. And so Abby actually taught me how to be a hypnobirthing teacher. So everything she said, I can absolutely say that is 100% true. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on. So you touched on the topic just there as you were talking. We're talking today about hypnobirthing being for all births, being for all birth scenarios. You can use hypnobirthing, whatever the journey looks like. So first off, I thought we'd just talk a little bit about why is there this kind of message, this image that hypnobirthing is perhaps only for natural births or only for home births, because that's kind of the image that we tend to see a little bit, isn't it? We tend to, that's often an objection that we hear from people is, I don't think I want to do hypnobirthing because I'm going to have an induction or I'm going to have a cesarean. So why is there this image? Why do people think it's only for a particular kind of birth?
Yeah, I really love that question. And, it almost surprises me when I hear people still saying that, because I think we can be, very much in a bubble of our own message when it comes to childbirth and feel like everybody hears it, but it's not true, is it? The amount of times that I'm on the school run and I, get asked, oh, what do you do? And I mention hypnobirthing, And this woman that has had a baby maybe 2 years ago will say, oh, well, I couldn't have done that because I had to have an induction, or that wouldn't have been for me because actually I wanted lots of drugs, and it breaks my heart a little bit because, I know as well as that absolutely they could have used these tools. So where does it come from? Well, I think a number of places. I think if we think about historically when hypnobirthing first became a thing, I really do see that there was more focus then on the whole pain-free birth thing. There was more chat about, do hypnobirthing and you could have a pain-free birth. So I think what people can take from that is that's the goal. So therefore, if they're thinking about a birth with medical intervention, they know they're not going to have, no pain relief. Who wants to have a cesarean with no anesthetic, no pain relief? So I think, one, that's where it comes from. Two, quite rightly, hypnobirthing teachers do talk about physiological childbirth. And when I say that, what I mean is, childbirth happening in the way that women were designed. So if we think about it happening naturally, without anybody messing with it, without anybody artificially starting it or speeding it up, a lot of hypnobirthing teachers do talk about that. And, I said there quite rightly, well, the reason I'm saying that is quite often it's the only place women hear about that. I know for myself, when I did hypnobirthing, 12 years ago, I had never seen or heard about a birth that was straightforward. I'd only ever seen the one born every minute style drama. I'd only heard the birth stories from friends and family where it sounded like, oh my gosh, every, healthcare professional was in the room and birth was done to her. So hypnobirthing teachers often do talk about physiological birth because actually it is important that women understand that their bodies were designed to do this, and that actually in most cases when the environment and the support is right, it can happen like that. And that can be a huge confidence boost to women and to birth partners who perhaps think about it and think, oh, actually, maybe I'm not scared of childbirth. Maybe I'm scared of what I think childbirth is like. And maybe what I think childbirth is like is not very accurate. So, of course, if we look at social media, if we, look at YouTube, if we, actually speak to hypnobirthing teachers or even go on a course, they're likely to hear about natural childbirth. Yes, they might hear about other things, but of course, because in our world, that seems quite unusual. It stands out, doesn't it? The birth video of the woman in a pool, looking calm, looking like it's a breeze, roaring out a baby without like this panic and rush of other people, stands out because we don't see that very often. And although it's really great that we see that and really empowering to know that actually birth can be like that, sometimes the knock-on effect can be that expectant parents think that's what we're aiming for. And those tools that we are learning is so that we get that. And of course, hypnobirthing did help me get that kind of birth, It absolutely did. Understanding my body, understanding how I could prepare, having powerful tools helped me get that birth because I wanted that kind of birth. Equally, hypnobirthing can be used in a birth with many interventions. And when I'm talking about interventions, I'm talking about help from healthcare professionals. And not just help as in, that lovely, support, that, gentle guidance. I'm talking about drugs. I'm talking about maybe even things like instruments. We're talking about cesareans. We're talking about having labour induced, as in started artificially for you. Of course, the tools for feeling calm, feeling in control are absolutely vital and incredible. Okay. But I really think that amazing image that we don't see very often really stands out in people's minds. And then the association can be, oh, that's what we're aiming for,
Absolutely. And something that stood out to me when you were talking just then, we were talking about the origins of hypnobirthing and how it started off. When hypnobirthing was first in its infancy, it was kind of introduced when birth was becoming increasingly medicalized. We've seen those photos of women, what was it called, the twilight birth, where they were literally just put to sleep as standard. To have their baby. And then we know about Dr. Grantley Dick Reed and all his work. And so hypnobirthing was kind of introduced as an alternative to the medicalization. And so it created that kind of polarization between those two. But as hypnobirthing has progressed into the modern world, what hypnobirthing actually means has also progressed, hasn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, like you say, it was seen as like the antidote to that, wasn't it? And of course, even now, hypnobirthing is talked about sometimes in the context of its natural pain relief. If you're reading a random book about pregnancy and childbirth, often hypnobirthing will be listed as a form of natural pain relief. So again, this association that it is just for the natural, that it is for to avoid all the other stuff. Okay. And like I said earlier, if that's what someone wants, it's an incredibly powerful course to prepare you and help you get that. But it's so important that other people that perhaps haven't got that at the top of their agenda, that perhaps know that actually they may have a cesarean, realize that these tools, do not go out of the window. No matter what your colleagues tell you at work, it is not something that only helps if your plan A happens. It's there for you regardless. Quite frankly, I'd probably go as far as saying, if birth goes down a different path to what you planned, that's a real challenge, isn't it, mindset-wise? So therefore, the tools become even more important, more powerful, and actually having that security and familiarity of those tools that you've been practicing for weeks, maybe even months, is so incredibly powerful. And that's certainly what I've heard from clients that have used their tools for an unplanned cesarean, an induction perhaps, that, many weeks before they did not see on the horizon,
I experienced that firsthand. So my first birth, I was pretty mainstream. I birthed in a hospital. I didn't know anything about hypnobirthing or anything like that. And I had quite a negative experience. But my second birth, I did hypnobirthing and I planned the home birth. You're right in that giving birth at home, what we know about physiological birth and how it unfolds, giving birth at home, your home is literally like designed to relax you. Birth unfolds a lot more easily at home. And I'd argue that actually hypnobirthing and what you learn in the hypnobirthing course is even more important going into a hospital, because we well know hospitals are not the sort of place where you naturally want to give birth. It's literally the opposite. Bright lights, loud, strangers. That's literally where your body is telling you not to give birth.
Absolutely. Yeah, like if you're birthing at home, I mean, I've had 3 of my 4 babies at home. And of course, I planned the environment because I'm a natural planner. And, there was a real excitement about planning what my living room would look like and all that. But actually, if I hadn't have had time to put out my candles and things like that, it'd have been a familiar and relaxing space because it's my home. It's where I do relax. It's where I do feel comfortable and safe. Yet in a hospital, we're going into that real unfamiliar environment. And what hypnobirthing does is it educates you on what you can do to that environment to make it feel more relaxing, more familiar, more birth friendly. And that isn't just because, the photos when you meet your baby will look prettier. That's actually because your body will function really differently when the environment is right. And again, I think that's such a misconception of birth, isn't it? That, the twinkly lights, the dimly lit, pretty environments with affirmations. And so it looks good on Instagram and it's so that we can trump people. And it is not about that. It's actually that the body needs that. It needs that kind of environment. And going back to what you were saying there about, the hospital, that's what hypnobirthing gives you. That understanding of that. But more than just how the room looks, it's having those internal tools, having those tools that really help relax you on a really deep level. Because as I'm sure everybody who's listening to this knows, we can't relax on demand, can we? I mean, have you ever been to an appointment for something random, maybe a blood test, and someone says, just relax for me? Well, they might as well just say, they might as well just say something completely random, because telling someone to relax does not make us relax. Yet when we are giving birth, when our bodies are relaxed, it is more comfortable and it happens more easily. So having tools that make that happen just with ease is incredibly powerful. And in a hospital where that is probably not the natural reaction to go into a hospital and relax, that is even more important. Add to that the fact that in a hospital, well, you may hear what's going on next door. You may hear conversations you don't want to hear. That if you were at home, you're probably not going to hear your next door neighbour giving birth at the same time, are you? But actually in that hospital, having distraction techniques that hypnobirthing gives you, super, super powerful.
I've talked a lot on Instagram recently about, association and building up association with things. And most people associate hospitals with operations and being ill and going and visiting a loved one when they're dying. If you already have an association with a building with that negative thing, you need to work really hard to try and break that association or to build a stronger association.
100%. It's said that our sense of smell is so powerful for our bringing back of memories. The hospital smell is so distinctive, isn't it? It has a smell because it needs to have a smell, as in it needs to be a clean place because there's ill people there. We want it to be clean, but as a result, it has that smell. And for so many of us, like you say, we have already got big associations with the hospital. So actually having tools from a hypnobirthing course, having associations of being at ease, being relaxed, feeling safe, and that might be as simple as building up a trigger with a scent that you take in, having a breathing technique that relaxes your body, having your birth partner be able to say something to you that actually holds a lot of power. That is so much more powerful than we realize when we're pregnant.
Talking about smell, so I gave birth to my little girl 2 years ago now. It's her birthday next week. And since giving birth, I use my hypnobirthing a lot still. most commonly in the dentist. And the dentist is another place where you go in and it's incredibly overpowering. The dentist smell is so strong. And I have a really strong phobia of the dentist since when I was very, very little. And since learning hypnobirthing, I've been able to stay calm when I'm having those dentist appointments. I'm not saying I enjoy the dentist. I'm never going to enjoy the dentist, but I'm able to get through an appointment now just using my visualization and my breathing without getting them to stop every 2 seconds, you know? And I think this is a really important thing to note as well, that these skills that you learn in a hypnobirthing course, it's not just for birth. You will automatically use your breathing and your visualization. Once you've cemented those techniques, you'll automatically use them in lots of stressful situations.
100%. My goodness, hypnobirthing changed my life. You know, like I quite honestly was not the type of person, or I didn't consider myself the type of person that would read mindfulness books or, go on a course about meditation. I needed that though. As somebody that does experience anxiety, somebody that is a big worrier, actually, I really needed those simple techniques. And I really don't think if it wasn't for hypnobirthing, they'd be in my life now, because I'd have probably continued to tell myself that I just wasn't that type of person. So like you, I absolutely use them in the dentist. I use them after a hard day with my children or during a hard day. I apply the mindset stuff to other things that I do in life that feel scary and feels really big. And I think also it's given me a bigger understanding of where fears come from, and actually why we don't need to dwell on things, and actually how it's doing us no favors focusing on the what ifs all the time and catastrophizing, and how that can be our go-to. It can almost be a habit to do that, but it's not serving us well at all. I mean, talking about the dentist thing, when you were talking about that, Ellie, it made me think about how the dentist is like hospital, as in we can have that reaction, can't we, where we sat in the waiting room and we feel tense, we feel nervous. And similar to the hospital, before we go, we can tell ourselves, there's no reason for me to feel like this. So if we take the dentist example, I can tell myself that he's only looking at my teeth. He's not doing anything. He's not going to be putting any needles in there. It's just looking in my mouth. But actually, when you get there, that logical and rational response means nothing, does it? You know that it's no big deal, but your body tells you otherwise. And that tension, that panic comes over you. And, going back to what we were saying earlier about birthing in a hospital and how actually hypnobirthing is incredibly powerful for that. That's why. Because actually we can tell ourselves, we'll be calm. Oh, I'll go to the hospital and give birth to my baby. I know I've got support there, so I'm going to feel really relaxed. We can't plan how we're going to feel. And actually, it's those bigger associations that actually decide what emotions and what our body does on the day, just like in the dentist example. So we've talked about hypnobirthing being, those lovely tools to stay relaxed. But as well as that, it's that I nearly said mindset shift beforehand, isn't it? It's that real releasing of fear, like mentally rehearsing something so that actually that plan to be calm has a lot more substance than just rocking up and expecting it to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you were saying before about you feeling like you're not the type of person to use mindfulness, you're absolutely right in that when we think of like meditation and mindfulness, we instantly picture someone like with a nose ring, with yoga trousers in a yoga studio. That we think that's the type of person. But mindfulness is actually used by lots of different people all over the world for lots of different things. You know, high flying top CEOs use mindfulness and meditation and visualization, lots of sports stars. You know, there are so many different kinds of people that use these techniques that we're using for birth. But actually, you can use them for all sorts of different things, can't you?
Absolutely. You know, you're so right. There's a stereotype, isn't there? And if we feel we don't fit that stereotype, we can write things off. And I guess this is really relevant for this conversation about hypnobirthing being for all births. Have we put hypnobirthing in a certain box and thought of it as for a certain type of person? A crunchy mum, perhaps, you know, somebody that has already decided how they're going to parent their children. And if we've not yet decided what box we're in, or we're not putting ourselves in a box, or we consider ourselves to be, you know, pregnant in heels or whatever, like we write it off. And, you know, it's something that I'm so passionate about, letting people know that it absolutely is for them, whatever birth, whatever box they're putting themselves in, you know? And like you say, mindfulness is highly regarded, hugely regarded in so many areas of life. You know, I often remember on my hypnobirthing courses when I talk about sport, you know, and talk about sports psychology and some of the techniques that sports people use, particularly, and I know this is quite stereotypical, but particularly for dads that were there that perhaps were a bit hesitant and maybe did think that they were going to come to some strange lady that was going to, you know, put a spell on them. Actually, hearing that, oh yeah, I know that this is used in sport. Oh, it's just like that. Yeah, it's not anything woo, it's not anything strange. It's actually logical and rational stuff that, you know, science knows has an impact on our bodies.
Yeah, and speaking of birth partners, I actually had a skeptical birth partner on one of my courses, right? And he was a classic skeptical birth partner, sort of, you know, he was just there to support his wife. And he came to the course and he was just there purely to support his wife, basically. But I got a message from him personally a few weeks after the course saying that he'd broken his wrist during a game of rugby and he'd used the breathing technique while he was in hospital having his wrist set. And so he was like, it does work. And he was a complete convert, which I thought was really, really funny. Really, it's hilarious. But yeah, speaking of birth
Oh, I love
partners.
that. Absolutely. And, you know, when people experience using the techniques and the power it has in everyday things, they really grasp that this is birth changing.
So something else that I just wanted to talk about as well is that we've spoken about hospital births versus home births, and something else that people don't really tend to think about is that this is a very portable skill that can be used in all sorts of different situations, and that sometimes things happen on the birth journey that you didn't even like think to predict. Like, you know, how many stories do we hear about people giving birth in cars on the side of the road or in an ambulance or in the car park, or perhaps there's a storm and you can't even get out your house, you haven't even planned a home birth. And having techniques where you are able to stay calm and you understand the process in all these different scenarios makes a difference between something, okay, that's out of my control, but I can still handle it, versus that's out of my control and it made it really traumatic.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, birth is like life, isn't it? Where we can absolutely do lots of things to help us get what we want, but there is always an element of unpredictability. It can be incredibly empowering to feel equipped to deal with a change of plan. And we might not know what that change of plan is. So, like you said, you know, it could be something that totally out of your control, like a storm that impacts, you know, getting to the hospital. It could be that, you know, you really wanted a water birth and for some reason the pools are out of action. It could be that, you know, there is something medically that means that as much as you've got a choice, it doesn't feel like you've got a choice, because actually it's a no-brainer that you're going to agree to this, you know, thing that's getting your baby out quicker. And in terms of hypnobirthing helping with this, the thing that I often talk about is one of my favorite birth affirmations. Well, no, I'm not going to say that. It's actually one of my favorite life affirmations. And that is, I know what I can control and I let go of the rest. In life and in birth, we can often focus on all the things that are not in our control, especially when there's been a twist and turn, you know? We do it on an everyday basis, don't we? Like stressing about the weather when we're planning a barbecue, you know, spending the week, you know, looking at the app on our phone, dwelling on like, oh, is it gonna rain? Is it gonna? And actually, that's the one thing that you're not in control of. But there are so many other things that you absolutely are in control of in that situation. So if we talk about the barbecue example, my goodness, we are not in control of whether the sky decides to rain. You know, we're not in control of that, but we can think about how we might deal with that if it happens. We might think about, okay, in that situation, what am I still in control of? What can I still do? Okay. Well, actually, you know, I've still got everybody come in. It's still going to be really lovely. We're still going to have that Prosecco. We're still going to have the burgers. Yes, we'll have an umbrella over the barbecue, but we're going to have all those laughs just like we intended. Okay. Yeah, the photos are going to be a bit dull, but actually, you know, we'll always remember and look back and laugh at that day when we all got drenched. Okay. And in terms of childbirth, like if we take the example of the pool not being available, okay, it is natural and human nature to feel totally annoyed by that, you know, to grieve not having the water birth that you wanted, okay. But what are you still in control of? You know, what can you still do that was so important to you when you were thinking about the birth that you wanted? Well, you've still got your tools. You can still set your room up to really, you know, pump that oxytocin. Is there any like reframes on this? You know, and by reframes, I'm talking about different ways of looking at it. Yes, it's annoying that there's no birth pool, but actually, I'm enjoying this TENS machine and I'll be able to keep it on. Actually, you know, if I was in the birth pool, maybe I wouldn't be as close to my birth partner, and I'm really enjoying him rubbing my back with that tennis ball. You know, I'm actually really enjoying moving around the room. Okay. Now, I would say that the person who is in charge of this reframe needs to be birth partner, because like I said, it is normal and natural to think about, oh, but I wanted that so much. And you totally allowed that big strop. You are. But then birth partner needs to be very much like, okay, but what about this? Let's do this. Okay, you told me that you wanted the room like that. Let's do it. And, you know, we can take that approach to many, many birth scenarios. You know, I've had clients that have planned home births that have actually had a transfer to hospital. Okay. Yet when they looked back on their birth, they felt like they got so much of what they originally wanted. Yes, it was in a different location, but they'd absolutely embrace this whole idea of knowing what you can control and letting go of the rest, you know? So, yeah, that's what I'd say on that.
Yeah, and you know, the progression of hypnobirthing over the years, it's gone from something that was simply just about breathing techniques and visualization and working with your body to now most hypnobirthing courses, they cover in a lot of depth, changing plans and, you know, putting together lots of birth plans and dealing with all those making decisions. You know, you get all of these things on a hypnobirthing course, don't you?
Absolutely. And, you know, these days, that is super important. You know, we are at a point in time where, certainly in the UK, interventions in childbirth are high. You know, if I look at my local trust, around 40% of women do have their labours started for them via an induction. Over a third of women are having their babies via cesarean. And some of those cesareans were not planned, you know? So actually, these women were not expecting that to happen. So actually, thinking about dealing with a plan change is probably more important now than ever.
Yeah, and also sort of knowing about these things and making those decisions ahead of time, because you talked about 40% of women having an induction. How many of those women, had they been informed and able to make those decisions, would have had enough assertiveness to actually say, no, I don't want the induction? So many of those women still don't know they can say no to those inductions.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you know, in terms of clients that I've taught people who've had several babies before coming on a hypnobirthing course. And when we've talked about choice and, you know, things like being able to ask questions when being offered interventions, often that's brand new information, you know, brand new information, despite the fact they've had babies before. Because often, you know, when we're pregnant, and I certainly felt this way, I looked to my midwife as being that source of all information. The reality is, though, that we see many midwives during our pregnancy, very rarely the same one more than twice. And often those appointments are super quick. So this isn't because, you know, midwives are withholding information and they're being very naughty and bad. This is because, you know, the state of the system is that actually they're working under real difficult conditions. So it is really important that we do know our options and we know what questions we could ask, because actually, when faced with, you know, a change of plan or something being offered that we didn't expect, even if we know we can ask questions, the response can be, oh, panic, freeze, not knowing what to say. So actually having some phrases up their sleeve is super, super useful, you know, and certainly that is one of the many things that a hypnobirthing course gives you.
And I think, you know, talking about associations as well, when we're very young, we're praised if we're good for the doctor. We're given a lollipop. If we do exactly what we're told, we sit there for the injections, we're praised. And then we grow up into fully grown women and we actually forget that we're not being given lollipops anymore. You know, we are allowed, we are the ones that are in charge of our own bodies. And it's very much, it reminds me of that story of the circus elephant. When they're a baby, they can't pull the rope, you know, but as they grow up, they're perfectly strong enough to pull against the rope. They just don't know it, you know. And it's very much like that. We forget that we are able to make our own decisions now, and we don't forfeit bodily autonomy just because we're pregnant.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, as much as I live and breathe talking about these things, I see that people pleaser and the good girl coming up so much in my own life. And yes, we're talking about it here in the context of maternity care, you know, but I see it coming up in my life with all sorts of things. We do this all the time. You know, how often do we go to the hairdressers and not like what they've done to our hair, but we go, oh, it's lovely, thanks. You know, we feel like expressing what we want is being a bother, is offending someone. And in terms of maternity care, we must not see it that way. You know, asking questions is not being a pain in the bum. It's not disrespecting someone's authority. And the important thing, I think, to remember is when you're asking questions, you're not questioning the professional, you're questioning the thing, you know? So if somebody is saying, oh, you know, would suggest that you have an induction now, and thinking, oh my gosh, if I ask questions, it looks like I don't value their medical opinion. you're not interrogating that person, you're questioning the thing. Like, what is the thing? What are the benefits of the thing? Why would I go for it? That is not being a bad girl. Yes, we shouldn't have this whole idea of the good girl, but it is so ingrained in us. So if we think about it as challenging the thing, it makes it so much easier and so much within our often people pleasing ideas about ourselves.
Yeah, and that healthcare professional is largely guided by policy. So she is not necessarily recommending induction because it's her opinion. She's recommending induction because you've ticked so many boxes, that she's guided by. And she might be guided by policy, but you're not. That there is nothing in law saying you have to follow what you're being told.
Absolutely. She may be recommending that thing and maybe even thinking, I wish I didn't have to say this. And often when I've questioned things, it has been met with huge respect and very much an attitude of, I'm glad you've asked that. I'm glad you've asked that, and I would do the same. It's really interesting when we look at how many midwives themselves will, decline certain interventions, will have home births rather than hospital births, because they know the pros and cons of these things. So you're not being a pain, you're not being rude by asking questions, you're getting the best care for yourself and your baby.
Yeah, and all of this knowledge, all of this assertiveness, all this self-belief is exactly what you learn on a hypnobirthing course. Just proving that it is for all births. It's for all birth scenarios, all birth journeys, isn't it?
Absolutely, really is.
We've been talking for a long time now, Abby, so I think it's probably time that we start wrapping it up. So before we finish, would you just like to talk a little bit about your services? And if someone were thinking of becoming a hypnobirthing teacher and were thinking, I might like to train with Abby, how might they do that?
Absolutely. Oh, thank you for letting me share this. So yeah, if there is even a tiny glimmer of, oh, could I do this? Could I help share this incredible knowledge with other families? Could I become a hypnobirthing teacher? Come over to my Instagram or my website. So you'll find me on Instagram at loveyourbirth_training, or you can find my website at www.loveyourbirthtraining.com. And when you come over to Instagram, of course, feel free to say hello or head to the link in my bio where there is a quiz where you will be able to find out if teaching hypnobirthing is for you. And if you decide to become a hypnobirthing teacher, I offer training for people that have never done this before. They've never taught hypnobirthing, but they want to, and they also want to make a successful business out of it. So yes, they want to leave feeling confident that they can teach hypnobirthing really well, but they want to also know how to get known by people. Okay, so I am one of the trainings that offers that fully rounded package. Okay, now if you're already a hypnobirthing teacher, I also offer an expansion course so that you can expand your skills and your support as well. So do come over and say hello.
And I can fully report that Abby is so supportive. Everyone that goes through Love Your Birth they receive so much support. I can't say that enough. But yeah, when I initially started to train with you, I hadn't intended to do it for another year. I was like, do you know what? I love this, but I'm going to wait a year because I've got a newborn. It's not the right time, and I'll leave it for a bit and do it next year. But then I broke my ankle. And I was basically on the sofa for 7 weeks doing absolutely nothing. So I was like, well, I'm not just going to literally sit on the sofa watching Netflix and eating donuts for 7 weeks. So I was like, I'm just going to do it now and use this 7 weeks to start studying. And so I'm so glad that I did, because it means I'm much further ahead now than I would be. So
Oh, wow. So
Yeah,
you're actually quite glad you broke your ankle then?
yeah. I looked at the positive. I could not control that I broke my ankle. That was outside of my control. But yeah, I looked at what I could control.
I love that. Absolutely.
Exactly. So before we sign off, have you got one final thought or one final piece of advice?
My main one is to remember that you don't have to be a certain type of person with a certain type of desire to be planning a certain type of birth to benefit from hypnobirthing. It is for everyone, and it absolutely is for all births. And believe me, you will learn far more than a few breathing techniques. It might even change your life.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Abby. I've really enjoyed this chat.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.